It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie Kay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Onyx News on the KUNX Digital Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and this evening we have a really great show for you. You're going to love our guest. I do want to mention a couple of things. We've got some fantastic conferences coming up. Please take a look at Journey to Truth, at Contact in the Desert, and, of course, XCon 2024. If you go to onyxnetwork.com, you will see a complete list of conferences all over the world. And if you have a conference to submit, please send it in to us and we'll make sure that we get it up there. All right. Our guest this evening is Grant Cameron. Grant became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May 1975 with personal sightings of a UFO-type object, which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. The sightings occurred in Carman, Manitoba, about 25 miles north of the Canada-U.S. border. These sightings led to a decade of research into the early work done by the Canadian government into the flying saucer phenomena. From here, Cameron proceeded to do almost 2 decades of research into the role of the President of the United States in the UFO mystery. Cameron released Contact Modalities, The Keys to the Universe, UFOs and Portals at Mount Shasta, the Canadian Government UFO Story, and a book, which is a book written by Nicole Sekich called Triangle UFOs. Cameron just released the book Weird, Apports and Manifestations, UFO Sky Pilots, about 3 dozen people who claim to have flown the UFO. The Ride, which is a series of articles about to be released, as a book on Jimmy Carter, where people will learn about the interviews with the presidents on the Holloman landing base story. The next book up will be Beyond Managing Magic, which is volume 2 of the Managing Magic trilogy. Welcome to the program, Grant.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, it certainly isn't your entire bio by any means, because you I don't know. I think you need about 10 pages by now, right?
No, that's all. I had no life. This is all I did.
This is, well, yes, you are a busy man. So I know you've done a lot over the years, but your next book, Beyond Managing Magic, what is that going to be about?
It's actually the 3rd book in. I've done disclosure. I hate disclosure with a passion. I keep getting dragged back into it. The first book I wrote on disclosure was back in 1990 with T. Scott Crane, which was UFOs, Area 51, and government informants. And since then, I kept getting dragged back into this notion of the fact that the government is leaking stuff. So I wrote that. Then I wrote Beyond Managing Magic, which is the idea that it's not just UFOs. What they're doing, what the CIA and all these agencies are doing, they're dealing with magic. They know that. They know it's a phenomenology problem. It's not necessarily a UFO problem. And then in 2018, I did Beyond Managing Magic, and I kept pulling it. I figured I don't want to go there. And I've actually got a guy who's editing it right now. So we're about to put it up. And there's actually going to be 2 more books. One's going to be called More Beyond Managing Magic, which deals with the whole stuff that's going on now with the Congress, all this kind of stuff. The Managing Magic, Beyond Managing Magic is a book that looks at the history of Tom DeLong, what actually happened there, the different disclosure initiatives that the government has had. And then there's going to be actually a 5th book. Like, I just can't get rid of this thing. But the 5th book will be one of the more important books that I've ever written. And that is that, the Tom DeLong story, the Bill Moore story. Well, let me give you a heads up, they're doing it again. And I'm part of this initiative now, and it's unfolding as I'm talking. I'm sort of an advisor to this thing. I can't believe this is actually happening. And it sort of backs up the fact that I say that there are people related to the government. They may not be in the government right now, but who are determined to try to get some material out. And so there's some meetings taking place. This is all very much a big spy story. I can't believe it's actually happened. So it'll be called, the final book will be called Drip Drip, the Core Secret. And that's what this is all about. It's about the core secret. What is the thing that they don't want to disclose in terms of what's actually going on?
A minute ago, you mentioned the term magic having to do with UFOs, and there's a consciousness involved in this. And I know that you have had experience with that, as I have for many years. It's just kind of now becoming mainstream with the CE5 idea. Of course, some of us have been doing that for years before there was a CE5. But can you tell me some of your experiences with telepathy and consciousness?
Okay. In this regard, I actually have 4 books that are written there. They have to go through editing, but one of the books I'm going to write I was going to call it the Super Bowl. And then someone told me you could get sued by the Super Bowl people. So it's going to be called The Big Game. And that is this idea. And what I do and I go through orbs, I go through telepathy, I go through the hitchhiker, Men in Black, and a poltergeist and ghosts. And I have these little chapters, and I show that it's all the same thing. It's basically just different interpretations of the same phenomena. And so my actual experience started very late. So I started in 1975. I have these 2 very dramatic sightings 2 days apart. I go out there. I don't believe anything's going to happen. There's a chance I'm going to see something. And all these people were reporting seeing in this small town of 2,000 people. And then when I saw it, I actually went, wow, there are like miracles. I mean, there's actually this stuff. I couldn't believe this kind of stuff actually happened. Mm-hmm. And so I started this pursuit, but I was into the nuts and bolts. So I chased the Canadian government. I chased the CIA people, high-level CIA people. I chased the president of the United States, and I actually got to, at one point, talk to a vice president about the subject on air. And so I chased that whole thing. And then what happened is I was watching Colin Andrews in 2012. And this is when I say that I couldn't have spelled the word consciousness, and I couldn't have cared less. And nobody was talking about consciousness. I don't care what anybody says now. You'll hear people using the word consciousness in the UFO field now. And I don't think they even know what's going on. They just know this is a big word and you better use this word. And as you said, you were doing it before. I had no idea this kind of stuff actually existed. And I was watching Colin Andrews give a lecture on crop circles and consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it was one of these lectures where in contact modalities, I talk about one of the ways to get into the field, to break into where all the answers are, to talk to God or whatever you want to talk about, is daydreaming. And that's the modality I was using. I was just sort of zoning out. I really didn't want to be in these. I wasn't interested in crop circles. I was just watching this lecture. And he was talking about this consciousness connection where you'd have these events where like these women meditating in a field for a pattern to appear. And at the same time, someone is putting a pattern down, a hoax pattern in the same field at the same time. And these kind of connection things. And it came to me with absolute certainty. I was sitting there and all of a sudden it popped into my head and it gave me 3 different things. And it basically, it just rocked my world. It was the idea that this is what it's about. It's about consciousness. And the 3 things that it gave me was, number one was in 1950, the Canadian government wrote a top secret memo that it doesn't get enough attention. And in that memo, it said flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. Had a group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush is working on it. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans. And we were also told by our American officials, not people on the street, American officials, that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. So this document popped into my head. At the same time, we had the highest level source that I think anybody's had, except for Dr. Eric Davis, talked to 2 presidents about the Holloman Air Force Base film. But other than that, this is the highest level source that anybody ever had. And he was the former chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. And that's where DARPA came from. Now DARPA runs all the black budget programs. And they formed DARPA. He was chairman of the board. He was a trustee for right from the word go. And at one point we were trying to get him to talk. And we said, come on, Dr. Walker, you're an old guy. Why don't you release the thing? And at one point he breaks it off and he says, look, let me ask you a question. And then the guy said, what? And he said, what do you know about ESP? And then the guy said, ESP, and they really didn't have an answer. He said, Walker said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how it works. And that was 1990. He gave that interview. So when I'm watching Colin Anders, suddenly this pops into my head and I go, oh, that's what Walker was talking about. I never knew it because he's talking rhymes and riddles. And then the other one it's escaping. I think it was Jan Hartson talks about an event. Oh, and he's talking to Ben Rich. So Jan Hartson goes to Ben Rich at Lockheed, the head of Lockheed, which is rumored to be the place where they've got recovered crafts and stuff like that. And Ben Rich is giving this lecture at UCLA. And at the end of the lecture, Jan Hartson realizes he had this experience as a young kid and he wanted to get the answer. He said, how do they get here? How does the propulsion system work? And Ben Rich turns around and he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan Hartson goes, well, no, I don't. And he said, look, that's how it works. And he walks out of the room and he gets in his car and he drives away. And so these three ideas popped into my head. It was like, this is how it works. And at that time, I really didn't know. I knew it was consciousness. And as the years have gone on, it's developed more and more. It's like more pieces came in and I realized the complexity that, I'm one of the people now believes that, as Seth said, you manifest what happens around you. There is no other rule. This bizarre idea that there may not be time, space. It all may be here now, and it's this, as I say, 1,000 times more complex than people think as to what's actually going on. If you really follow some of the literature and the fact that nobody sees the same alien, nobody sees the same craft. Like Lakatsky comes forward and says all 200,000 sightings in the OSAP database all were different. And I went and I had the people, 36 people through the craft. So I went back and I looked. Sure enough, no single person. They all would have. There's a theme, like a near-death experience or a dream. They had a theme of they would touch the craft. They would become one with the craft. The craft was conscious, and whatever they thought was what would happen. They could go from here to the other side of the galaxy instantaneously. And the thing was, nobody touched the same thing. I could not believe it when I went back and one would touch a ball, one touched a beehive, one touched the panel, one touched the panel on the wall. And I thought, what's the chances that everybody did something different? But it was the same theme. So that's where I've sort of gotten now. I'm into this complexity about is there an objective world out there, or are we part of the world we see? Or you can even go back to Kit Green, the guy. If you have a UFO experience in the high level general or a government official, they send you to Kit Green. Because Kit Green's worked on this. He was the control officer of the remote viewing program in the 1970s. And he's the guy that tries to figure out, is the Russians brainwashing you? Are you crazy? Or have you been abducted? And that's what he's trying to figure out. And he says the same thing, that you can have two people in the same event who see two different beings. And that's this idea that we are part of what we're seeing. We want to believe there's this objective world. And I think that's part of what they're covering up, is the fact that they really don't understand this any better than we do, and that it's this very complex thing that may not be as nuts and bolts as people think it is.
Yes, it does seem to be that an experience is just for that person, or that they get out of it what they need to get out of it. I've seen this over and over again in my own investigations, where you'll have 5 people observing the same thing and they all come away with a different description.
Yeah, or you get the people where they'll say, "Oh, I don't think I've been abducted. I think I just had dreams about being abducted or with aliens." And then I'll go, "So, anything else happen weird in your life?" And they go, "Oh yeah." They start telling you ghosts, the house is haunted, and that's what you realize. I remember I asked Yvonne Smith one time. I said, "Yvonne, you did all these regressions of all these people." I said, "How many of them have had paranormal phenomena after they had the experience?" And she starts laughing. She goes, like 99%. And that's what people don't realize, is that experiencers start to have apports and manifestations. They start to be precognitive. They can heal people. 50% according to the free survey, 50% of people say either they were healed or somebody in their family was healed, and that they can heal other people. And I remember Ray Hernandez saying, if I had $1 for every person that told me they did Reiki healing, I'd be a millionaire. It's like, just everybody's into this kind of stuff. And that's when you start to realize this is much more complex. That's why Ron Pandolfi, who's this guy that's supposedly rumored to brief the president, that's what he said in 1991 to a guy by the name of Dan Smith. When he first became involved, he said to Dan Smith, he didn't talk about UFOs. He said, we have a phenomenology problem. And that's what it is. It's phenomenology. It's all these different things. And if you're in the CIA or the National Intelligence or whatever it is, what you realize is, if we can perfect this, Like you're familiar with the slide 9 that they used to brief the Senate and the House. This slide 9 that talks about all the threats, and they talk about putting stuff through metal and telepathy and stuff. And that's why they went to Skinwalker Ranch. People say, oh, they went to UFOs. Jacques Vallée, if you read his diary in 1997, 1996, he's going, what are we doing at Skinwalker Ranch? There's no UFOs here. Like, we're wasting our time. What's Bigelow want us to do here? And the thing was, they went there because they were put 4 bulls inside a trailer, inside a locked trailer. And of course, the intelligence went, whoa, man, if we could do that. Or they had these special forces guys that had this message that came in their head and said, leave, you are not welcome. And these guys were so scared, they never went back to the ranch. And it's that kind of stuff. Man, if we could develop this kind of technology. Or the story that when they had the portal, that the military actually came in. This is the story that was told. They actually came in and they sealed the thing off. Even the people in Skinwalker Ranch weren't given access to this, and they were very interested when this story about the portal opening and this being came out. That's what the intelligence service is looking at. You and I may be looking at some sort of spiritual thing as to why we're interested in this. To them, it's all military. It's all weapons. Right. If we can develop this kind of stuff, if you can talk in the foreign leader's head and tell him she's talking to God and I want you to surrender or do this or do that. Or even in my port book, I detail already in 1974, a document from the Defense Intelligence Agency that ran the OSAP program that everybody's familiar with. In 1974, they write a document about ports. And to paraphrase what they said, if we could perfect this technology, we could actually go to the enemy. We could go into the safe, get the documents, bring them back to Washington, photocopy them, put them back in the vault, and they would never even know we were there. And that's what they're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to Skinwalker Ranch for a minute. They're back on now for a new season. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but they just showed last night where they've got some LiDAR, I believe, involved, where they did some type of scanning, and you can see these round circles that are right exactly where this portal is located. Yeah. And now I've remote viewed that site from the beginning, and I saw a portal there. And so gradually over the years, they have discovered this portal, and they've gotten some images of it. So when you said that the government sealed it off, I wonder if it's the same portal or if there might be 2 there.
Yeah. My recollection of the story, and I have to verify that it actually, because I'd never heard of this until a couple months ago. That was when Eric Davis and a couple other people, and they were going around, and this thing opened up and this being came out. I think that's what it was, because they were all connected to the government at the time, like Eric Davis and all these guys. The government had insides in there. They knew exactly what was happening. And that's when I heard that they just came in there, were so interested. And I remember John Alexander. I remember there was a story that Sid Goldberg from Gaia TV tells me that he was interviewing John Alexander, who was the manager of the whole Skinwalker Ranch when they first bought it. He was with Bigelow and stuff like that. And I remember Sid was telling me he kept asking John Alexander. The interview was over and they were in the parking lot, and he was asking John about this UFO sighting. And then John cuts him off and he says, look, it's not about the UFOs. It's about the portals. And he gets in his car and drives away. And then I go, whoa, he said that. It's like, because I did this book on portals at Skinwalker at Mount Shasta. I actually did 2 books. And the one because I was fascinated with these Missionarama people, and they called them Zendras, and they could open these things up. And the idea that they had was like a CE5, but what you would do is you'd use meditation and oming and stuff like that to raise your vibration. Then the theory was that the beings would lower their vibration and they'd meet in the middle, and they would open up these portal things, and they meet in between, and they could take 7 people into these Zendras. So I knew there was an event that happened in 2014, 2015. And then I got dragged into this thing, very bizarre, where the girl used to help me edit books. She was and these are all Latino people. So everybody speaks Spanish there. And so she said, do you want to come to Mount Shasta? We're going to meditate for world peace. And I said, well, Katerina, I really don't have anything against meditation, and I don't have anything against world peace, but I don't think I want to sit on the side of a mountain in California and meditate for world peace. And she kept saying it. And I went, well, she helped me out a lot, so I'll go to California and I'll go meditate up for world peace on the mountain. And I knew they had opened these portal things. So I went, well, okay, we'll go there. And my assistant and I were traveling across the country, and that's just, you see these bizarre events that start to happen. And suddenly there's a phone call, and Aunt Terrell, who's the being that is supposed to be appearing there, there's this message from Aunt Terrell through Ricardo, through Paula Harris, through Katerina. And Katerina says, hey, she says, we got a message from Aunt Terrell for you. I said, a message from me from Aunt Terrell? Because then I knew I'd talked to Chris Bledsoe, and he had a message for me about music. He said, I got a message from the Guardians for you. And I said, what was it, Chris? He said, well, they want you to know the messages in the music. And I said, well, Chris, I don't listen to music. You're talking to the wrong guy. So I knew from Chris Bledsoe, that turned out to be a book called Tuned In, The Paranormal World of Music. So I knew to listen carefully. So I said to Desta, my assistant, I said, so what's Antarell say? Get the exact message, exactly what's he saying. And it was sort of like they wanted me to post it on Facebook. And he said, we know Grant's coming to the mountain and there's going to be what they call a programmed sighting on Saturday night. So a programmed sighting is in Mission Rama, they do this all the time, where two people will get a message. And they're telepathic messages, and they use automatic writing. And when they get two people who agree on a message, they know, and this message came in, this would happen at 9:33 on this Saturday night. That's exactly when it happened. It was just so bizarre. Wow. So they when I went there, I thought, oh wow, they're going to open a portal. We're going to open one of these Zendra things. And then I got really excited. And they do, like, another thing they do is they do fasting. So it's Wednesday. So I start to fast, and I figure I really don't want to go in the portal. I think, well, why don't you take one of the girls in the portal? I'm not into experiences. I had my UFO setting. I couldn't care less about seeing stuff. I'm not really that interested. But I thought, okay, if I got to play the game, I'll play the game if that's what's going to happen. And what happened was this thing was flashing over my head, directly over my head. It was really weird because I thought it's got to be over the group. And there was about 120 people in the group. It's got to be above the group. No, I think it's above my head. And people confirmed, yeah, it seemed to be right above my head. There was this flashing. And I remember Ricardo asked me when it was all over, he said, so what do you think, Grant? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to offend the guy, but in my head I was going, that's it. That's the best you could do, is flash 7 times. I mean, come on. If you've seen what I saw in 1975, and yet he started to get these automatic messages. He had this, it was pitch dark. He's out there and his wife's holding the cell phone and he's doing this automatic writing. And I go, wow, why did I have my video camera? I go, why didn't I bring the video camera to the circle? I could have filmed this. And then he would stop and then he'd go into meditation again and open it up and he's automatic writing. And I'm saying to Desta, he's writing sideways up the page. She said, no, it's the way he's holding the book. I said, no, he's writing sideways up the page. And it was like, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And these were messages from Antarell and from this female commander of the ship, and messages for me. And it was like, it's like what I say about the UFO phenomenon. When you get into it, you realize that you are in the Super Bowl of all stories, that you're on the field. Not only do you know there's a game plan, you're playing in the most bizarre, interesting, important event that's ever happened in human history. And I always feel honored every day that I got to have these really bizarre experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Those sound pretty wild.
Yeah.
I have been to Mount Shasta and I had an experience myself as well there. And that is just a magical place. If you want something to happen, go to Mount Shasta. And
some of the stuff, I can tell you one story that I like to tell that doesn't make it made public. I think I may have put it in one of my books. But it really hasn't gotten any attention. That was, this event keeps going. So it started 2014. There was an event 2015 with Antarell. Then this Adama, who's there's 33 different aliens from this Apu planet. It's this whole, and it's all Latino. It's like, I think my mission was to write these 2 books to bring it to the English speaking world because it was all Latino. And in 2020, these people that were at the former events got dragged in again, and they got messages to go back to Mount Shasta. And this Adama guy is going to show up in 2020, but that was COVID. So we didn't go down there, and they were on 111 people. And Adama said, if 111 people show up, we will show up. And so I think they only got 44 or 45 people or whatever. And then Katerina, who was my assistant, she was there. And another friend of mine from Chicago was there. And so they told me this story. That is the wildest story I've ever heard in my life. This is how these things work at Mount Shasta with these Apu aliens or whatever they are, and they're different types of aliens. They're very heavy set. Everybody describes them like Michael Phelps, a swimmer, very muscular, wearing this tight thing, beautiful, like out of the Bible, this long hair and flowing hair and stuff like that. And so these 44 people, and there's a whole pre-story. They had to go to Sedona, Arizona, and touch 3 different things, and the rain was coming, and then it would stop, and it was just this bizarre story. But anyway, they show up there, and this is Saturday morning. So the event usually happens on the Saturday night. Sunday morning, everybody goes home. So they're having a birthday party at 2:00 in the morning, and there's 9 people around this thing. And I've got 3 of them on camera. They're telling this story. First, they didn't want to tell the story. And by the time the interview was over, they're all fighting to tell the story. And so they're sitting there, and they're in pitch black. So they're sitting in the middle of this field where, if you've been there, it's the sand flats. So there's no trees, but there's this sort of sandy area. And they're sitting there having this birthday party. It's 2:00 in the morning, and everybody's going home at 7:00 in the morning or whatever. And they're sitting there, and the one is intuitive out of Mexico City. And she says, Adama's here. And they go, how do you know? I just know. I know he's here. And then she looks, oh, look, there's a light on the edge of the forest. And then everybody says the same thing when that happens. I've heard this story so many times. Oh, it's just a campsite. No, it's not. This is not the aliens. It's just a campsite. Somebody's light. And she says, no, that's them. They're there. And then she says, oh, they say they want us to go over there. And then she goes, we can't do that. It's pitch dark. And they got potholes and stuff. You break your leg trying to go across this field because there's no light. It's pitch black. She says, we can't go there. So she gives this message back. She says, you come here. And then, no. She says, we don't want to go across. Somebody's going to get injured. And then the Dama says, okay, then we'll come to you. And she says, it was like elephants. They could hear these coming across this field. And they all just freak out. They're petrified. And they don't know what to do. So they all grab hands. These 9 people hold hands. And they start to doing this oming thing, which is part of their protocol. They do meditation, praying, oming, all this kind of stuff, mantras and stuff to raise your vibration. They don't know what to do. So they grab each other's hands and they start to om. And they said, suddenly they're levitated into the air. So there's 9 people that levitated into the air.
What?
And a Dama shows up. And I remember they were there. And then I says to the one guy, and these are just ordinary people, like gardeners and, ordinary people off the street. And I remember the one guy, my assistant, Sinead, was asking, and she says, so was a Dama there? He said, yeah, he was there. And I thought there was like 2, like usually there's and they're 10 feet tall. And then there's 2 shorter beings, like 8 foot tall beings. That's usually the pattern of these Apu beings. And then she says, so is there other beings with them? Yeah. How many beings were there? And I still remember this. And he said, there were as many beings as there was trees in the forest. And I went, holy cow. So they're sitting there and they're levitated in the air and they're oming. And then they said the beings start to om. So the beings are oming. There's hundreds and hundreds of these beings, and they're like energy type beings, and they're there. And then they said the weirdest thing was we were oming and it sounded like we were underwater. And I said, they're in the Zendra. And you do enough study of Zendras, you know that when you're in the Zendra, these people, you can't stand straight. The gravity, something wrong with the gravity. And when you talk, it sounds like you're underwater. So when these people, I don't think they even realized they were in a Zendra. They thought they were levitated in the air. And that's when they said, it sounded like we were underwater. And they were there. And then the beings, I said to them, well, how long did it last? They said, we have no clue. No clue whatsoever. It just suddenly ended. And they're back in their tents. They'd gone back to the tents. And some of them were so scared. These beings, they could see like there's lights in sort of around the camp, and you could see these beings. They could hear them walking around the tents, and that some of them just packed up their tent 3 o'clock in the morning. And they took off. They were so petrified.
Oh my gosh!
And then they went down to the bottom where my friends were at this. They were staying at a cabin down at the bottom. Usually they don't allow you to stay off site. You have to be in your tent, and you got to be on the site. But they went down there, and that's when the beings showed up in this room. And it was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like the most bizarre story I've ever heard in my life. And there's like 9 witnesses. I got 3 of them on camera. And then what happened was the CIA is very interested in portals. They're extremely, and same with because they realize this is what it's all about. It's not the physical thing that people think it is. It's got this portal connection to it. So I was dealing with the CIA kept putting this story out that they've got this portal, that they actually have one that's operational. So I went to a guy who had been assistant for this CIA guy and said, hey, Kevin, I said, guess what? Another event happened, because they wanted to send someone to this event. They wanted to send somebody connected to intelligence to this event. And they end up not going there. But I talked to this Kevin guy. I said, hey, there's been this event. And I told him the story about the 9 people levitated in the air. And he said, okay, we're going to go to Hollywood. You do a thing and you tell the story on a show or whatever. And then I'll tell you what the CIA knows about portals. And I said, well, I told you already, I'm not going on camera. I'm not the type of guy who's like, I'll tell you what you want to know. I'll give you all the answers. I'll do whatever, and the names and whatever, set it off for you. But I'm not going to sit in front and read a script. There's no way. I don't do that kind of stuff. And so then it got back through my assistant, got back to these people that the grant was dealing with the CIA. That was it. Nobody, it just complete silence. Nobody wants to talk anymore. But this is a story. They will not talk about it. They said they were going to do a book. So you may see a book coming out of Mexico in Spanish that describes the story. The most bizarre, and the other event they had during the day that was caught on camera is they do this event. It's kind of, I don't know if you've ever been to a Mission Rama event, but it's like another world. And they do this meditation thing where they all lie on the ground and they're meditating, and they put rose petals on it, red rose petals. I guess make them out of paper or whatever. And they got these red rose petals, and they got this film, and it looks like a bunch of people have been shot, like a mass murder. It's like they got these, and they're all lying there. And then the one woman says to a Dama, she telepathically says to a Dama, can we film? And they said, yes, you can film. So the camera, it's 1 minute and 27 seconds or something. And you see the camera goes, pans across, and then it goes back again. And that's it, 1 minute, 27 seconds. So they're showing it to my friend Jan Yonder in Chicago. And he said, look, Jan, they got this thing coming out of the trees. And he goes, no, that's not a UFO. That's a lens flare. And they're pointing it at the camera as they got to the side. And you get a lens flare off the sun. And then he said, but what's that other thing in the film? And so you slow the film down. And at the beginning, they start, and you can see like they're on the sand flats. So you have trees all around the sand flats. So they start, and you can see, and it looks like somebody in a white robe, completely white, all the way down. It's definitely a being, some sort of being, and it's beside this tree. Then they pan across, and then they pan back, and the being has actually changed spots to a different tree, and you can see in front, it looks like a portal, like the front of the tree is all sort of blurry in front of the tree, and this being has moved back, and there's a shadow. In the first one, there's no shadow. In the second one, there's a shadow of the being on the trees in behind it, but the light is coming from down below because the shadow is like 5 times the size of the being. And he said, what's this thing? And it's just wild, where you got this being that appears, and it changes from in this 1 minute 27 seconds. It goes from one tree to the next tree, but you can't see it, but you can definitely tell it's like in a white robe, and there's no face on it or whatever, and it's facing. No, I can't tell, but it was just bizarre. Where you have this one event in one day, and nobody's ever heard this story. I try to tell it because it's just shows you how bizarre this thing can get. That there's no end to what these beings can do in terms of performance. That's the way I see it. I call it the theory of wow. It's the Jesus circus act, where Jesus comes, he walks on water, he feeds 5,000 people, he does all this weird stuff, and then he deliver the message. And that's what they're doing. To me, I call it the theory of wow. The phenomena, all it's doing is making you go, what the heck is going on? And the more, because awe and curiosity is what drives science. If you're not curious,
that's true.
And they're trying to get you curious and get you to realize, I call it shattered reality. They get you to realize, no, the world does not work the way you think it works. And because you keep going, like, this couldn't be possible to happen. And that's what I think they're doing. So the circus acts, when I started in 75, it was just simple sightings. Now it's like anything goes. It's like unbelievable. There's nothing that someone can, even Whitley Strieber said that, unless the story is really weird, you don't believe it. The weirder it gets, the more real it is.
Well, that's most certainly the weirdest one I've ever heard. Indeed. And we are up on a short break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes and continue with Grant Cameron.
The Onyx Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Onyx Network website at onyxnetwork.com. That's onyxnetwork.com.
This is Margie Kay with the Next News, and we're back with the one and only Grant Cameron this evening. Grant, you mentioned about the portals at Mount Shasta, and I grabbed a few of your book covers here. Let me see if I can. Okay, here. This one you mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah.
And is that is out now, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a big one. A lot of contact people use that. This is contact modalities where the idea is that everything's in the field. All the answers are in the field, or God talks to everybody. It's just certain people are listening, and certain people have abilities that they're able to break into the field. Mine was through, daydreaming, but people go through a front shield of a windshield of a car, trauma, and there's all sorts of events, and they suddenly get intuitive and they're able to tap into the field. All the materials there. It's the ability to shut down the left brain, shut down the noise in the left brain, and get into the field. And you can pull material back, and that's what the intelligence people know. Why would you not? That's why a lot of times experiencers will complain that the government is watching them. I said, well, do you blame them? Where do you think they get their information from? Of course they're going to be watching you if you've got contact. That's when they went to Chris Bledsoe. And Chris said, what are you doing on my property? Why are you here on my property? To ask Tim Taylor from NASA. And then Tim says, well, Chris, he said, it appears they like you. They're here. You got contact with them, Chris. They don't like us. They don't talk to us. So we're here to find out what their message is. And that's what people don't realize, is that sure, they're going to watch you. If you're in contact, they want to know what's going on as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They're watching me. Have been for years. What about this one?
Yeah, Jimmy Carter. That was when he went into hospice. He had the same thing I was diagnosed with. And I went, holy cow! So we put the book out, and that's when people don't realize that Jimmy Carter. Everybody says, well, Jimmy Carter didn't keep his promise. And in the book, I basically tell you, yeah, he did keep his promise. He basically did everything. And the key is that the president of the United States can't have his fingerprints on anything. So he had his press secretary, and he had his science advisor, and he had all sorts of people doing various things for him, trying to get information. They were trying to shake down the CIA for documents. Half of all the FOIA documents, people don't realize, came under Jimmy Carter. He was forcing out a lot of stuff, but you never heard Jimmy Carter, his name, involved with it, because it was the idea that the president, as Ron Pandolfi said, and there's been a denial that he said this, but he said, we tell the president what he needs to know and hope we don't have to put him down.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, Dan Smith wrote this on his blog one time. I'm like, holy cow. And this is the idea, is the president cannot be a player. So they sort of keep him out of the loop if he wants, to know. But you don't want the president in a position where he's got to lie in front of the public or have to answer questions that he can't answer, because that's the whole thing. If this consciousness thing is true, if this weird stuff, and it's not as nuts and bolts people think it is, they really don't have the answers that people think they have as well. They're trying to figure this out as well, and that's the whole deal now. Is that it's been written in that if it's an unacknowledged special waived access, a waived unacknowledged special access program, then even the existence of the program is top secret. You cannot even confirm that there is a program. That is a violation of security. And that's why they have to lie about this thing, because it is, the Canadian said in 1950 already, top secret Canadian government memo said, we were told by American officials, flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated 2 points higher than the hydrogen bomb. And that was in 1950, 2 years before the hydrogen bomb was actually built. So this is the big secret. It's almost like the Super Bowl. We're in the Super Bowl, the biggest story of all time, and it is the biggest secret of all time in terms of the guys that have it. And they may be trying to get a patent on this material, because this Tim Taylor guy made a lot of money. He was in contact with the beings as well. He had this protocol where he would get up like a contact modality. His was, he'd get up in the morning after 8 hours of sleep. Then he would go back to bed again for another hour. That was important. He had to go back to bed for another hour. Then he would get up and he would get a big glass of water. And he lives in Florida. He would go sit on the deck in the sun, and he would drink the water, and the beings would start talking to him. He's got 44 patents on different medical inventions. And I actually had a face-to-face with him in 2013. He told me about the download experience. When the first one came, he tried to put on the space shuttle. And I remember he said they're fighting him, and he couldn't get, and everybody said, this is crazy. It's not going to work, Tim. There's no way it's going to work. And then he said, no, and where'd you get it? No, I can't tell you where I got it from. But he said, and he got a scientist to sign off on it. Went on the space shuttle, it worked. And then he got called to the Pentagon, and this general said, who came up with this idea? And they all pointed at him. It was him. And so he told me, he said, Grant, the night before I got that idea in my head that in the morning that was the first invention. And he said, all I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. And I went, oh, really? Could you see its face? And he goes, no, I couldn't see its face. I said, oh, man, everybody sees the hooded figure. I said, you should go to Yvonne Smith because you go to LA all the time. He works with kids in cancer, in operations and stuff. It's all medical stuff. He's in operating rooms a lot. I said, when you go to LA, you should talk to Yvonne Smith. She can regress you and you can find out who you were actually talking to. But that's the thing. So he's got 44 patents. And I think a lot of the secrecy Visible College is people sitting in the background because they realize, I mean, if you can suddenly realize how to put something through metal or how to go from here to the other side of the universe instantaneously, it could be worth a few bucks. And so if you're a scientist, you're not going to put your stuff on the table and let everybody else know what you're doing. There's no way. So the government has their reasons to keep it secret. And I think a lot of the scientists are, in fact, you probably know that I was the guy that pushed the Wilson leak document onto the internet. And then later I was really furious. Like after I took all the flack for this and had a big mouth and stuff like that. And how could I do this kind of thing? I realized like Jacques Vallée had it. Leslie Kane had it. Everybody had this document. Hal Puthoff had the document. And everybody just sat on the damn thing for 10 years. And I'm the guy that had to go leak the thing. And that's the thing. So the scientists are sitting in the background and they're holding the stuff back too. And it's my expression always is in the Bible. What profiteth the man he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What good does it do if you figure it out? You don't tell anybody. That doesn't help anybody. I'm not in this to make money. I'm not in this. So to me, I'm sort of known as the guy who will tell you anything. You know, it's like if I hear it, it's an interesting story. I think everybody should hear the story. If it's interesting to me, it'll be interesting to everybody else. But a lot of people have vested interest in trying to work this subject to make money or to build weapons or whatever they're going to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the scary part. It just makes me think that from the beginning with ufology, let's say since the 1940s, that the government has put a lid on everything because whatever they find, they want to weaponize. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, the highest level secrets. I knew this. I wrote this back in the 1990 book, UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants. The fact that weapon secrets are the highest level secrets there are. And that's because of the potential of national security that if the other side gets this stuff. And so they've always worked this operation where they keep it secret. But now it's gotten even worse. And I pointed out to people that the reason this latest disclosure thing failed, it was not because the government. It's because it was a political thing. Was the fact that I say that if the Democrats had 6 more seats in the House, we would have had disclosure because they had this round Schumer amendment that went forward and it was passed 18-0 in the Senate Intelligence Committee. And then it went and one guy in the House decided, no, I'm blocking the thing. And he got the Speaker of the House to go on his side and say, no, we're going to block this thing. And once you get the Speaker involved, then it becomes a vote of a party vote. And it's not going to pass. So they went back to Schumer and they said, the thing's dead. We're killing it. And so what happened now, it's even worse, is they had to rewrite the bill. And now they're going to have the 9-person panel that would be able to subpoena people and force them to testify as to what's going on. They were going to have the eminent domain. They were going to force the contractors to give back the material that they've been given. And I always point out to people, where do you think the contractors got this stuff from? They got it from the government. The government they don't do UFO flying saucer technology. So they give it to the contractors to try to figure out. And then now they say, well, they want the stuff back. And the contractors say no. And that's now written into law. There's no panel. You can't subpoena them. They get the eminent domain. They get to keep the stuff. And the thing is even worse than it was before, where now it's written into law because it was passed by the House, the Senate, and the president signed it. Now it's law. You can't change it. So you have to get one party who's on board with this thing, and they control the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Unless you get that, this thing ain't going anywhere. It's dead, and it's actually worse than it was before because this is actually law. And I always point out to people that it's always been law. That if it's a waves unacknowledged special access program, you cannot talk about it. You cannot. That's if you see the Wilson leak document where Eric Davis is talking to this Admiral Wilson, this head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he said, "Oh, this and this," and he answers, and then he asks a question. He say, "Core secret, can't talk." And that's the thing. There's a core secret. These are core secrets that you cannot even acknowledge that this thing is. And this is the biggest core secret that there is. And that's the main reason that they do it, because the Russians, it's like a game of cards. They want you to put the cards on the table. The Russians and Chinese and Canadians and whoever else has got part of the secret. And Putin may have 80% of the thing, and you put down the cards and he's got the other 20%. And he says, oh, I decided I'm not going to disclose. Now they got 100% and they know how it works, and you don't have it. And everybody knows that whoever controls this secret, the technology, I mean, especially if you get the flying the craft, where people say, the being says to you, like you talked about telepathy. So the being says to these people, imagine it in your mind. Where do you want to go? My friend Ron Johnson, my Mormon buddy from Utah, his whole life experience. And I'm still trying to get his book out. He documented everything, his entire life. He's got piles of experiences, underbody experiences and stuff. And he documented it. So he's on the craft, and they said, where would you like to go, Ron? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from distance. And they said, okay, Ron, imagine it in your mind. When you imagine it in your mind, we will go there. It's going to be a very intense G-force for 1 second. So Ron imagines this, and he says, like, intense G-force for 1 second. He looks out the window, and there's the Milky Way off in a distance. That's 50 to 70,000 light years in 1 second. If that's true, there's something wrong with our idea of time and space. And if you're a military guy, you go, wow, would we love to be able to get that? And so that's what this whole thing is. And people were told this idea, imagine it in your mind. The two women said, we were told, imagine it in your mind and then push the button. They were pushing this red button or something. And the boom, they're on that side of the galaxy. And that is just unbelievable. If that technology, there's no way we have this kind of technology. People will claim, I think we have the jump technology, because Tim Taylor, when he was talking to me, and I didn't know who the guy was. I mean, he's this high level guy. I mean, probably the highest, one of the black guys that knows how it all operates. And he said we were in this cabin. I didn't realize who he was. He was sort of there because Chris Bledsoe was there, and he told me about his download experience because he knew I was in download. And he actually introduced me to an experiencer who he's watching. He's watching these experiences, and they document stuff for him because he's trying. That's the whole idea. You got to talk to the people who are interacting with the intelligence. It doesn't help to watch stuff fly around the sky. There's people who are in contact with this. And so we were in there in this cabin in Pennsylvania. And then he says, hey, Grant, what do you think of this? And he always does this thing. What do you think? He doesn't tell you anything. He just, what do you think of this? And he shows me this painting. It's painting of these two guys flying through space. And one guy looks older than the other guy, and they look like they're wearing pajamas. And it's this weird sort of painting. I go, I don't know, Tim. I have no idea what it means. And he said, oh, what about this one? He goes, all these balls going down a tunnel. And he said, what do you think of this? And he shows me another one. And then he shows me this panel on the side of a wall with these outer space scenes on the outside of a building. And I go, I don't know, Tim. And he says, what do you think of this? And he shows me this 1956 or 57 Chev on top of the parkade of this building. And he says, there's a postcard in the back seat. And you see it? Yeah, I can see the postcard. And he said, you know what it says? Says, is this guy talking to his girlfriend or vice versa, she talking to him, I wish I could fly through time and space to be with you, or something to that effect. I said, that's what it says? And then he says, you know where this is? I said, no, I don't know. Tim, I don't know what you're talking about, Tim. And he says, this is a Hughes aircraft building in Los Angeles. I said, Tim, I still don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. So, you know, and I don't know, and then people always ask me that I'm not sure whether he said this is where it was, or this is where it was rumored to be, or whatever. He said, this is where the jump room was, the CI jump room, the Obama thing where Obama goes to Mars and stuff. He said, that's where it was. I said, really? And I said, let me show those photographs again. And he shows me the photographs again. And then he says, you know where the one with the two guys flying through space is? And I said, no, where is it? He said, it's right outside the elevator. I said, it's right outside the elevator. So I contact Andy Basiago. I said, Andy, when you're a little kid and you're at this place is at 999 Sepulveda Avenue in Los Angeles. It's right outside of LX. You can take a bus, go there, and you can look. And these paintings are still on the wall. And then I said to Andy, Andy, there's two buildings, 999 Sepulveda. Were you in the back building or the front building? Because I'm trying to see, is the front building was where these paintings were. And he said, I was a young kid. I don't remember us in the front building or the back building. And that's the kind of stuff where you go like, wow. And yet that doesn't get released, where they're working on this kind of stuff. And then you hear the CIA's got it. And that's what I say. If there's some sort of technology that they have, I don't think it's flying technology. It's got something to do with the fact that this is got to do with portals. That seems to be a key thing. Every time I run down the anti-gravity thing, it doesn't go anywhere. It hits a brick wall. Every time I run down the portal thing, there seems to be something at the other end. In fact, I have one guy who was very close to the CIA, and I asked him, I said, I'm tired of this. I'm so tired of this thing. It doesn't go anywhere. I'm just interested in the portal thing. Do you think I should hang around? And he goes, yeah, you should probably hang around. I go, okay, fine. So cut 3 years later, I'm talking to him, and then he says, you know that question you asked me about the portals? And then I said, yeah, it's real. And I go, really? It's real? So he's basically confirming this. So there's some truth to the portal thing. That's a key to the story.
Well, here's your book, The Portals and UFOs of Mount Shasta. When did that come out?
Yeah, let's see. That would be 3 or 4 years ago. I wrote two. There was two different groups, and they're sort of like one was an English group, one was a non-English group. So I had to go to both of them, and I wrote one book on Ricardo's group, and then Enrique's group. I went to the next year. I went to Enrique's group, and then it was another bizarre event up on the top of the mountain. I won't get into that, but it's just bizarre. And I had enough for a book on the one weekend of this event of the stuff that was going on. Because when you go to these Mission Rama things, there's all sorts of weird stuff happening, and yet you have this idea where they get across, which is very important. Is like I always get upset when you have sky watches. People got lasers, and it's like. You're supposed to be shutting down the left brain. You're supposed to be meditating. You're not supposed to be talking and everybody's talking and stuff like that. And that's what it comes down to, is this ability to send a message, to get it across. And there's to me, there's too much fooling around going on. People are in it for entertainment. That's what Eric Walker said to us. He said, "Why should we change the rules and the regulations to satisfy your curiosity? You're just curious. Admit it." And he's exactly right. People, I always ask people the idea where he said, "So when you get the story, what are you going to do with it?" And this is the idea of the dog chasing the car. So when the dog chases the car, what are you going to do? So if the government suddenly admits that the UFOs are real and they know about it, so what are you going to do? It's like everybody's going to go, okay, well, so what about the aliens? They're just going to go to the next story. It's for 99% of people, it's just pure curiosity. They really don't care. They just want to hear a good story.
Well, and I think most people, if the government came out with full disclosure tomorrow, would say, "Yeah, we know that. What else do you have for us?"
That's what happened. That's what this fifth book that I'm doing, this book called Drip Drip, where they are dropping this thing again. That's what I've maintained they've always done. And a lot of people say, no, they're not doing this. And it's very clear. Tom DeLong was talking to McCaslin, McKay, and Robert Weiss from Lockheed Skunk Works that came out in the WikiLeaks leak of Podesta's emails. We know he was talking to these high-level guys, and they were in the government at the time. So if they're in the government at the time and they're talking to a rock star about UFOs, they're leaking this stuff. This is not happening by accident. And they're doing this. And what they're trying to do is acclimatize people. So I remember 75, and you've been in a long time. Well, 75, I said, probably extraterrestrial. I believe less about that now. It's a little more complex than that. But as it went along, it did nothing. And people would say to me, I wrote an article in 2009, the 64 reasons why the government has decided not to tell you the truth. And there's no way I ever believed they would actually reveal that they were doing UFOs. And in 2017, the article came out. Chris Bledsoe told me the year before that they were going to do this. But the article came out in the New York Times and said, yeah, the government's doing UFOs. And what happened? Because people have been acclimatized. Stephen Greer, and I was writing this as well. Stephen Greer and people were saying, oh, oil will melt down. You're ever going to realize oil is not worth anything. Stock market's going to crash. People are going to jump off bridges and stuff like that. And what happened in 2017 when the New York Times came out with the article? Nothing. Everybody's right. Yeah, we knew that, right? Okay, what's the next thing? And that's what they're doing. They're raising the consciousness to the fact that when they make a disclosure, that it really doesn't affect anybody. They don't want you back in 1947. They want you to go. So what they're doing is they're leaking the story. They're putting disinformation around it. And then they put the story out. So what they'll do is they'll tell me 1971 was the Holloman Air Force Base film. And then they'll go and tell Linda Howe it was 1964. And so now Linda and I are fighting about whether it's a 64 or 75. And everybody goes, I don't know what to believe. So that's what they do. Instead of killing you now, what they do is just throw mud in the water. If you got a good story, just put a second good story that sounds like your story, and that conflicts with your story. And it's like you just, one guy said, just throw whatever in the water. And that's what you do is you just distort the story and nobody knows what to believe, but the story's getting out. And that's what they want. So they'll give it to bad people like Lazar. Lazar had a bad background. They knew he had a bad background. They actually asked him in his second interview when he was being interviewed for EG&G, what's your relationship to John Leer and what do you think about him? So they knew he knew John Leer. And John Leer was the crazy guy that was talking about the aliens shootout under the base. And he was known as this crazy guy. Nobody's going to believe John Leer. And that's what he did. Lazar went and took the story to John Leer. And John Leer was telling the story and nobody would believe there's air UFOs at Area 51. And then what happened was George Knapp had in May of 1989, he was missing a guest on a show. And he said, hey, you got that guy from Area 51 says he worked there? Bring him on the show. We want to do it. And they backlit him as Dennis. And the story went viral around the world because no, it's no longer telling John Lear, crazy John Lear telling the story. Now it was George Knapp, Emmy Award, Peabody Awards and stuff like that. And the thing went viral. So that's what they're doing. They're leaking it to people, but they put false information. I think the beings are doing the same thing too. They sabotage you as well. They sabotage you with information because they don't want. If the aliens wanted to land and tell you the story, they'd tell you the story. If the president people always do this thing about disclosure. If they wanted the story out, they would stand the president up, make a news conference, bring in the Washington Post, New York Times, take them, show them the craft, show them the documents. That's not what they're doing. Everybody's doing this gradual disclosure, this drip, drip, drip thing.
Very, very gradual.
And so is the government.
Yeah. Absolutely. Golly, Grant, I can't believe the hour went by this fast. I need about 10 hours with you sometime. You are just full of information, and it's been wonderful having you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll see you on the cruise. We're doing the cruise in September.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We will be doing
there's no time limit on how long I can talk. That's the thing I like the most.
Well, the whole cruise will be Grant Cameron.
We're hoping to do a contact event there. We're trying, the events in the morning where people can go tell their story, because that's what people want. They want to be able to tell their story because their friends and relatives don't want to hear it.
Yep. I was planning on it so we could do something together.
Beautiful.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay. Thanks for your interest.
Thanks so much for being on.
Okay.
Well, that is a wrap for today, and I'll see you here again next week.